One of the most true things I've ever heard in music is a good drummer can make a bad band sound good. But if the drummer's bad, there's almost nothing the band can do about it. So I think all of us drummers want to get good. But what does that even mean? Today, I want to try to define what makes a good drummer and how to know if you are good. Before we dive into it, I just want to say two things. Number one, this list is subjective, and it's my list. Your list might be different, and I'm totally okay with that. And second, I really don't think there's any drummer in the world that's 100% perfect on all of the things on this list. I know I certainly am not. I'm still working on these things every single day, and every great drummer that I know is also still working on themselves. Okay, I'm going to talk mostly about things that you do sitting at the kit, the musical things that make a drummer really good. But stick around to the end of the video and we'll talk about a couple of things that we do that have nothing to do with music at all that also make for a good drummer. The number one thing on my list is timekeeping. Can you play consistent time? And this might be a little bit controversial, but it's my belief that if you cannot play good time, then you're not a good drummer, regardless of any other skill that you might have. There are two key components for the skill of keeping good time. Number one, can you play with a click? In the modern world, it's getting more and more common to play with a metronome, even live on stage, or with a backing track. These are absolutely expected these days, and you need to be able to do it comfortably. The second aspect is, without a click or without a backing track, do you have a solid internal pulse? Can you play through grooves and fills without rushing or dragging? In short, the rest of the musicians that you play with need to be able to rely on you to keep the beat, to keep steady time. I mean, we're drummers. This is what we do. I would also argue that if you can keep good, steady, consistent time, you might lack in a lot of other areas, but you're probably a pretty good player. Next on my list is feel. There is a difference between playing great time and feeling great as a drummer. It's a subtle difference. There are a ton of good drummers out there that have just solid time and crazy good chops, but it just doesn't feel good when they play. If you think about it like speaking a language, a good drummer knows how to pronounce each word and which syllable to emphasize and which words to emphasize, when to get louder, when to get softer, how to make the sentences make sense rather than just saying the words. All notes are not created equal. And as you listen to great music, you'll hear that drummers will emphasize certain notes while other notes are almost completely hidden in the texture, like ghost notes. All right, next up for me is technique. You might sometimes hear this referred to as chops, but technique refers to the how of playing drums. This is definitely how you hold the sticks and how your joints move. It might be how you sit and how your feet interact with the pedals. But when we say a player has a lot of technique, that usually means they can play really fast with a high degree of complexity. For me, I think the best definition of technique is being able to express on the instrument what you hear on your head that's appropriate for any given situation. There are a ton of ways to develop your technique. One that comes to mind is learning the rudiments and applying them to the drum kit. But it starts with having a good understanding of how to set up your kit and then how to interact with your kit, such as holding the sticks properly. You want to figure out the best ways to move relative to any voice on your kit and the kit as a whole. I do want to say that I don't believe there's just one correct technique, but I do believe that there's a set of principles and concepts that you need to follow in order to develop effective high-level technique. My first and most important rule about technique is that it cannot hinder you in any way. A good technique will always enable you to get faster, louder, more complex, more creative, whereas a bad technique will always limit you at some point. The next aspect of being a good drummer is your sound quality or your tone. Part of this is, of course, just simply having instruments that sound good, good cymbals and good drums, but then also knowing how to tune those drums so that they can produce the sounds that you're hearing in your head. And another part of having a great sound is actually playing the drums in a way that they produce their best sound. So this could really fall also under the technique umbrella, but let me tell you what I'm talking about. You've probably heard this before, but one of the things that I like to focus on is trying to play sound out of the drum rather than playing sound into the drum. The next time you're sitting at the kit, just try these mental images. Try thinking about playing sound out of the drum versus hitting sound into the drum. You'll see exactly what I mean. A while back, I went to a concert. It was a major national touring act. In fact, it's an act that I'm not going to name the name, but you would definitely know who they are. Huge national act. And for one of the songs, the drummer was the songwriter. And so he moved to a piano and sang the song. And they kind of made a big deal of inviting the drum tech out to play drums for that song. And he was obviously quite a bit older than the band and, shirt and tie kind of a guy. But he sat down at the drums and I could not believe how different they sounded than when the actual drummer played. I mean, every single note, it looked like he was just focusing so hard on how do I get the very best tone out of the drums. It was a crazy experience and it really got me thinking about my technique and what I could do to sound my best with every note. Another crucial aspect of being a good drummer, at least to me, is knowing a wide variety of styles and having a vocabulary in those styles. One key part of my philosophy is that I'm not a jazz drummer or a rock drummer. I'm a musician and I play drums, and I want to be able to be comfortable in as many styles as I possibly can. Just like you wouldn't want to be fluent only in one topic of conversation. Say that all you can talk about is sports, but you can never talk about books or science or anything like that. Your life gets pretty limited. So for me, again, musically, it's important for me to be comfortable in those different subject areas, those different styles. I've also found that developing myself in those different genres, especially if it's an area that is initially uncomfortable to me, is going to make me better in the areas that I'm already comfortable in. So if you're a rock drummer, consider spending some of your time playing jazz or bossa nova or samba. I guarantee you it'll change the way you play rock for the better. There are 3 big categories of styles that you want to be comfortable in. And of course, these can be broken down into literally hundreds of subgenres, but they're a good starting point. The first one is rock or funk. And this also covers most country, rap, hip hop. It's literally anything with a backbeat. The second group of styles I usually think of as swing. And you might generically call this jazz, but for me, it's anything that's a swing beat or a shuffle beat. And then the category of world or ethnic styles. Essentially, these are styles that are influenced by rhythms and sounds from all over the world, and then adapted and incorporated into a drum set style or a drum set setting. I know for me as a young player, I started with bossa nova and samba, and then I graduated to bembe. And from there are lots of regional styles like sango, soca, merengue, Mozambique, salsa, mambo. The list is literally endless. Okay, next up is grooves. And I know I just talked about styles, and this is just a little bit different. So when I say grooves, I'm talking about a couple of things. First up would be specific grooves. These are specific patterns that you can play at any time, almost without thinking about it. They might be quotes from songs like 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover or Superstition, or maybe a classic James Brown funk groove. Or if you're a jazz player, it might be Sing, Sing, Sing or Take 5. And once you've learned some of these grooves, you want to be able to adapt them not only to your personal style and expression, but also to any situation that the song or the band or the style might demand. Essentially, you want to have a vocabulary of grooves that you can draw on almost without thinking about it. Not that you necessarily have to copy anything or play anything note for note, but you can sound like it. You can approximate those things really anytime you want to. Not only will these come in handy if you are actually covering some of those songs, but they give you a solid, informed baseline when you're coming up with parts of your own. Besides, no band or listener for that matter wants to listen to the same 3 grooves for a whole album or a whole concert, so it really helps to have a variety of tools in your toolkit. Just like with grooves, you want to have a wide vocabulary of fills ready to go at any time. Fills are one of the tools that we use to get the listener to hear certain things or to put a spotlight on something, if you will, whether it be the vocalist or a dynamic change or a section change. As a drummer, you also need to be aware of the overall arc of the song. It's not enough to just play a cool drum part and some cool fills. You actually need to know, what is the song trying to accomplish? What are you trying to say with this piece of music? You need to know, when is it time for you to be almost invisible or even out? And then when is it time to unleash an absolute volcano of a fill? What's your job in this song? Remember that as a drummer, you're there to serve the music, not just play a groove and a fill. A lot of the time, the job that we have is not to draw attention to ourselves or be flashy, but it's to support the level of the music. So if it's something that requires, say, like metal chops, then play the metal chops. But if it's a light pop song, you want to almost be invisible until it's time to play the big fill. When we know our job and do our job and sound like a drummer, we make it easier for everybody else in the band to do their job, and we also make it easier for the audience to get what is going on in the music. In short, know what your job is and do it. A few years ago, I was lucky enough to go to the NAMM show in Orange County, California, and I got tickets to a feature show from one of the major drum companies, and it featured a lot of their endorsed artists, and so I was super excited. And as I went to that concert, I was expecting to hear basically, massive drum solos all night long. I just wanted to see chops and explosions. It could not have been further from the truth. The first person to get up and talk, who was also a great drummer himself, he basically said, "Hey, look, we all know that our job as drummers is to not play solos, but it's to play grooves. So this entire night, what you're gonna hear is our best grooves and our best interaction with the band." And that's what they did. It was almost 3 hours long. It was something like 18 drummers that were all endorsed artists, again, from a major drum company. And it was one of the coolest concerts I've ever been to in my life, and not a single drum solo got played. Okay, on that note, sometimes you actually will have to play a solo. I think it actually is possible for most drummers to go a very long time without playing a solo, but in the event you get asked to, you should be prepared. This could be anything from just simply trading fours in a jazz situation to taking like a full-on 20-minute John Bonham unaccompanied open drum solo. We're going to talk about how to develop a good drum solo in a future video, but for now, let me just say this. If you're working on all the other things in this list, then becoming a capable drum soloist is a natural progression. You absolutely can do it. And lastly, for my list today is dynamics. Dynamics is simply how loud or soft you play, and it's also how loud or soft the different parts of the drum kit are relative to each other. I talked a lot about this in an earlier video, so I won't delve too deep today, but it really just starts with an awareness of how loud you are being relative to the band, and then making a decision as to how loud you should be. At the end of the day, a good drummer has an awareness of what they're doing and how it impacts the band and the people around them. And they have good musical communication skills. In short, they're listeners. And I hope it's not too simplistic to say, but a good drummer is going to serve the band, serve the music, and a bad drummer is going to serve themselves. All right, just for a second, let's talk about things that great drummers, or really any musician, will do that has nothing to do with how they play. Number one, be reliable. Do what you say you're going to do and show up when you said you were going to show up. Don't be an exception to the rules. Next, be willing to adapt. Be flexible. Something is always going to change, whether it be an additional song or a change in the venue, or maybe a speaker goes down during the gig. Just be adaptable and flexible. Next is just to try to be a good person. Be nice and kind. Be honest. Have good personal grooming habits. And lastly, we call it being a good hang. Get called back on another gig because you're somebody who makes every aspect of that performance better just because you're there, not only musically, but personally as well. People who get called back over and over are low-key, positive, and easy to work with. So obviously this is my list of what makes a good drummer, and it's subjective. So let me know in the comments, what did you disagree with, or what did I miss? I'd love to hear what you think. And once again, thanks for watching. If you aren't subscribed already, I would really appreciate you clicking the subscribe button and go ahead and leave a like. I'll see you in the next one.